She cleaned the mansion without knowing she was being watched every day. The billionaire pretended to be just the silent driver who dropped her off at home every night. If you love stories of love and romance, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment saying where you're listening from. Let's continue. The rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of the Reynolds mansion like impatient fingers, creating a sound that Vincent knew by memory. Each drop was a familiar note in the nocturnal symphony that had accompanied him for years, since he decided to transform that property in Chicago's Gold Coast into his personal refuge. At 42, Vincent had learned that silence came at a high price, but was worth every penny invested in thick walls and perfect acoustic insulation. Seated in his Italian leather armchair, he observed through the panoramic window as Chicago's lights spread out like fallen stars. During the day, he commanded a business empire that stretched across 3 continents: technology conglomerates, real estate investments, stakes in mining companies. His name was whispered in boardrooms with the same reverence reserved for ancient gods. Vincent Reynolds wasn't just rich, he was untouchable. But every night when the last employee left the mansion and the automatic gates closed with a definitive click, Vincent transformed. He exchanged his Armani suit for a dark shirt and jeans. He stored his Swiss watches in the safe drawer. He descended to the underground garage where, among Ferraris and Porsches, waited an ordinary black Toyota Camry with cloned plates and impeccable fake documents. The illegal taxi had become his drug 5 years ago. Not for the money. The rides barely paid for gas. It was for the anonymity, for the sensation of being just anybody in a city that knew him too well. In the driver's seat, Vincent could observe real life happening in the back seat. Couples fighting, executives cheating on wives, students counting change to get home. He absorbed each unintentional confession like an emotional vampire, feeding on others' pain to feel less empty. The first time he saw Emily was on a cold Tuesday in January. She timidly waved on Michigan Avenue, near the subway station, carrying a plastic bag that revealed boxes of medicine, 23, maybe 24. Brown hair tied in a simple ponytail without pretensions. She wore a coat too thin for Chicago's winter and worn-out sneakers that had known many walks. When she entered the car, Vincent felt something strange in his chest, a tightness he couldn't name. She murmured a polite, "Good evening," and gave an address in the South Side, East Zone. Her voice was soft, but carried an invisible weight. During the journey, she looked through the window with a melancholy that seemed too old for her age. Vincent drove in silence, but his eyes constantly returned to the rearview mirror. There was something about Emily that disarmed him. Perhaps it was how she held her purse in her lap, protecting it as if it guarded treasures, or how she thanked him when he didn't turn up the radio volume, respecting her silence. When they reached their destination, she paid the fare with counted coins and left a symbolic tip that he knew had cost her next day's lunch. After she got out, Vincent remained parked on the street for long minutes, watching her climb the hill toward a small house with flowers in the window. Something about that scene touched him in an inexplicable way. For the first time in years, he felt the desire to protect someone instead of possess them. In the following days, Vincent found himself driving around the area without passengers, hoping to see her again. When it finally happened, a week later, he could barely disguise his relief. Emily entered the car with the same shy politeness, but this time carrying a worn notebook and a pen. During the trip, he saw her scribbling verses on the paper, biting her lower lip in concentration. She was a poet. Vincent discovered this when she dropped a sheet while leaving the car. He waited until she was out of sight before picking up the paper. The verses spoke of longing, of a sick grandmother, of dreams kept in drawers too small. The handwriting was delicate, almost childish, but the words had a depth that surprised him. Vincent kept that paper like a talisman. The rides became weekly, always on Tuesdays and Fridays. Vincent began to plan his nights around these casual encounters. He studied her schedules, memorized her routes. He discovered that Emily worked as a cleaning lady during the day and studied literature at night at a community college. That she lived with a diabetic grandmother who needed expensive medications. that she walked 2 hours to save on bus fare when money was tight, and then fate played its cruelest trick. The following Monday, Vincent was reviewing resumes in his office when the housekeeper knocked on the door. Mrs. Martinez was a Portuguese lady who had run the house for decades with iron fists and a soft heart. "Mr. Vincent, the new employee arrived to replace Connie. Would you like me to introduce her?" Vincent didn't even raise his eyes from the papers. "Not necessary. You know what to do." "But she's different from the others, sir. Very polite, somewhat shy. Said she really needs the job." Something in Mrs. Martinez's tone made Vincent look up, and then he saw, through the half-open door, a familiar figure coming down the main staircase of the mansion. Brown hair tied back, the same. Thin coat, the same worn-out sneakers. Emily. The paper he was holding slipped from his hands. The world seemed to spin in slow motion as he watched his secret passenger scrub the marble handrail of his own house, not knowing that the kind taxi driver who took her home every week was the same man who now employed her. Vincent closed his eyes and smiled. Sometimes the universe had a perverse sense of humor. For 3 weeks, Vincent observed Emily working in his house like a predator studying its prey. But it wasn't predation in the traditional sense. It was something more complex, more sick. He installed additional cameras in the corridors, angles that captured her every movement. He reviewed the recordings every night, studying how she folded towels, how she hummed softly while cleaning mirrors, how she stopped to admire the paintings on the walls. Emily was different from the other employees, not just because of her age or the education that showed in every careful gesture. There was an almost sacred delicacy in how she treated the mansion's objects. She didn't clean, she cared. As if each piece of furniture, each ornament was a piece of someone's history that deserved respect. Vincent discovered that she always arrived 20 minutes early, using the extra time to feed the stray cats that gathered in the back garden. She carried sachets of cat food in her bag, sharing her own lunch when the animal food ran out. Gradually, the cats began to associate her arrival with safety, and Vincent found himself waking up earlier just to watch that ritual of kindness through his bedroom window. Tuesday and Friday nights continued the same. Emily entered the taxi without imagining she knew the driver. Vincent perfected his transformation. He wore fake prescription glasses, let his beard grow for a few days, constantly changed his haircut. He adopted a slightly rural accent, invented stories about a wife who didn't exist and children he never had. "Today was busy at work," Emily commented one of those nights, looking more tired than usual. "The boss walked around the house all day. I've never seen him so close before." Vincent almost lost control of the wheel. "How's that, miss?" "Oh, he's kind of strange, you know? Rich but weird. Always watching everything like he's looking for something. The other girls say he never gets married, never brings anyone home, kind of lonely." "And you, what do you think of him?" Emily was quiet for a moment, watching the city lights pass by the window. "I think he's sad. He has these eyes, I don't know, like he lost something important a long time ago." Vincent felt his heart race. She saw him. In some inexplicable way, Emily could see through the mask he had worn for decades, even without knowing who he really was. "Are you afraid of him?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "No, not afraid, but there's something about him that makes me uneasy, like he knows things about me that I don't know myself." Vincent had to stop the car at a red light that lasted an eternity. Her words echoed in his head like bells. She felt it. In some primitive, instinctive way, Emily perceived the connection between them. The next morning, Vincent made a decision that would change everything. He began leaving clues, small, almost imperceptible. A book of poetry on the library table, open exactly to the page she had copied in her notebook during one of the rides. A song playing softly on the kitchen radio, the same one she had hummed in the car last week. Emily started to notice. Vincent saw the confusion in her eyes when she found these fragments of her own soul scattered throughout the house. She would stop, frown, look around as if searching for explanations. But she never asked. She kept the discoveries like secrets, and Vincent delighted in this silent complicity. That's when Ryan appeared. Vincent was reviewing contracts in his office when he heard unfamiliar voices in the garden. Through the window, he saw Emily talking with a simple-looking man about 30 years old, with an easy smile and calloused worker's hands. They embraced with the familiarity of people who share history, and something inside Vincent shattered like glass. "Mrs. Martinez," he called through, the intercom trying to control his voice. "Yes, Mr. Vincent." "Who is the man in the garden?" "Oh, he's a friend of Emily's. Ryan, I think that's his name. She asked permission to talk with him for a few minutes, said he was a childhood friend." Vincent hung up the intercom and continued watching. Ryan spoke animatedly, gesturing a lot, and Emily laughed in a way Vincent had never seen, a free laugh without the layers of caution she always carried. It was as if this ordinary man's presence had the power to restore a younger, more carefree version of herself. When Ryan said goodbye, Vincent noticed they exchanged phone numbers. And the following Friday, for the first time in months, Emily wasn't at the usual taxi spot. Vincent drove around the city all night, looking for her in the streets. He felt a corrosive anxiety taking over his chest, as if an essential part of his routine had been ripped away without warning. Around 2 in the morning, he finally found her leaving a simple bar in Wicker Park, accompanied by Ryan. They walked close together, unhurried, talking quietly. Vincent followed them at a distance, feeling both powerful and pathetic. When they reached the bus stop, Ryan hugged Emily protectively, kissed her forehead and waited for the bus to arrive before leaving. Only then did Vincent approach with the taxi. "Need a ride, miss?" Emily turned, surprised and clearly relieved. "Wow, what a coincidence. I thought I wouldn't find a taxi at this hour." During the journey to the south side, she was different. Lighter, more talkative. She told him about Ryan, about how they had reconnected after years without contact, about his plans to restart his life after a complicated divorce. "He was always special," she said, smiling at the window. "When we were kids, he defended me. From boys who picked on me because of my books, said I'd be a famous writer someday." Vincent gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "And will you be?" "I don't know. Life kind of happened, you know. Sometimes I think some dreams are too much of a luxury for people like me." "Don't say that. Dreams don't choose social class." Emily looked at him through the rearview mirror as if seeing the driver for the first time. "You seem to know a lot about postponed dreams." Vincent didn't answer, but in that moment he knew he was lost in a completely new way. It wasn't just desire or obsession. It was something deeper, more dangerous. It was the desperate need to be seen, known, loved by someone who still believed people could be saved. The meetings between Emily and Ryan became frequent, and Vincent felt each one like a slow knife wound. He hired a private investigator to discover everything about the man who dared to steal his obsession's attention. The report arrived on a grey August morning, and Vincent read it with the meticulousness of someone studying a war enemy. Ryan, Santos, 31 years old, unemployed mechanic. Divorced 6 months ago from a woman who left him for a real estate agent. 2 small children he saw only on weekends. Lived in a rented room in Pilsen. Had his name on a credit blacklist and owed 3 months of child support. But there was something else in the report. Something that made Vincent's blood freeze in his veins. 15 years ago, Ryan had been a beneficiary of a social program funded by an anonymous foundation, St. Vincent's Orphanage, in the North Zone. The same orphanage where Vincent had spent his first 12 years of life before being adopted by the Reynolds. The same orphanage that had caught fire on a winter night, taking with it all the records and memories of children forgotten by the world. Vincent dropped the paper and ran to the bathroom, vomiting everything in his stomach. The memories came, back like a flood. The cold dormitories, the rationed meals, the nights he cried silently so as not to wake the other boys, and Ryan. Vincent vaguely remembered a smiling boy who always shared his lunch, who organized soccer games in the yard, who had the rare gift of making others smile even in misery. Fate was mocking him. Of all the people in the world, Emily had reconnected with someone who shared the same scars of abandonment that Vincent carried. But while Ryan had managed to maintain the ability to love simply, Vincent had transformed into something dark, possessive, incapable of real intimacy. That night, Vincent followed them to a popular cinema downtown. He parked across the street and watched them buy popcorn, laugh at something in a movie trailer, walk hand in hand to the entrance. For 3 hours, he sat there in the dark, imagining the two sharing whispers in the dark room, perhaps a first shy kiss during the session. When they came out, Emily was different. There was a luminosity in her face that Vincent had never seen, not even during the taxi rides when she felt more comfortable talking. It was the luminosity of a woman being courted, desired, seen as someone special by a good man. Vincent followed them to the subway station. He saw Ryan buy 2 tickets, saw him insist on accompanying Emily to the south side, even knowing he would have to return alone in the early morning. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with genuine care. The kind of care that Vincent had never offered anyone because he didn't know how to love without wanting to possess. The following Monday, Vincent made a decision that would change everything. He called his personal lawyer, a man who didn't ask questions and solved problems for generous sums. I need information about someone. And then, I need certain things to happen. What kind of things? Mr. Reynolds? The kind that makes a person rethink their life choices. In 2 days, Ryan received an irresistible job offer. Supervisor at an imported car dealership. Salary 3 times higher than anything he had ever earned. The only condition was to start immediately and spend the first 3 months at a branch in Rockford, away from Chicago. Vincent followed everything through his investigator. He saw Ryan struggle with the decision, talk with Emily on the phone, for hours explain that it was his life's chance to pay off debts and be in a position to fight for custody of his children. He saw Emily encourage him to accept, even with tears in her eyes, because she always put others' well-being above her own happiness. The following Friday, Emily was back at the usual taxi spot, but something had changed in her. The lightness of recent weeks had disappeared, replaced by an even deeper melancholy than before. Vincent felt a toxic mixture of relief and guilt seeing her enter the car. "How was your week?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Complicated," she replied, looking out the window. "Sometimes we meet special people at the wrong time in life." "Wrong time? How?" "You know when you meet someone who could make you happy, but life pushes you in different directions. It's like the universe is testing whether you really deserve that happiness." Vincent felt his chest tighten. "And do you think you deserve it?" Emily took time to respond. When she did, her voice was choked. "I don't know. Sometimes I think I was born to take care of others and give up my own wants. My grandmother always says some people are made to be safe harbors, not to sail." "Your grandmother is wrong." The firmness in the driver's voice made Emily turn, surprised. For the first time she really paid attention to him. Vincent felt the weight of that look and almost lost his composure. "You don't know me," she said softly. "I know enough. I know enough to know that you deserve to be loved the right way. You deserve someone who sees how special you are, who takes care of you the same way you take care of others." Emily remained silent for the rest of the trip. When they reached their destination, she took her time getting out of the car. For a moment, Vincent thought she might say something, make some connection, but she just paid the fare and murmured an almost inaudible, "Thank you." That night, Vincent couldn't sleep. He walked through the empty corridors of the mansion, stopping in front of each camera he had installed to observe Emily. He realized, with painful clarity, that he had become the kind of man he himself would despise. He was manipulating an innocent woman's life, pushing away her chance to be happy, all to feed a sick fantasy of control and possession. But he couldn't stop. The need to have her close, to be part of her life in some way, was stronger than any moral sense. Vincent had spent his entire life building empires, accumulating power, but had never desired something with the same intensity as he desired Emily. And that intensity was beginning to consume him from within, transforming him into an even darker version of himself. The following Tuesday, when Emily arrived for work, Vincent was waiting for her in the living room. For the first time in months, they would be in the same environment, breathing the same air, without disguises or taxis between them. Vincent had planned that meeting with the precision of a military operation, but when he saw her standing at the door, holding cleaning supplies and looking at him with a mixture of surprise and nervousness, all the words he had rehearsed disappeared from his mind. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," Emily said, slightly lowering her head in an automatic reverence that made something contract in Vincent's chest. "Mrs. Martinez said you wanted to see me?" Vincent was sitting in a leather armchair, facing the window, pretending to read a financial report. He wore a navy blue suit that cost more than Emily's annual salary, but at that moment felt more naked and vulnerable than he had ever been in his life. "Yes, please sit down." He indicated the sofa across from him without raising his eyes from the paper. "I want to talk about your work." Emily approached slowly like a wild animal testing the safety of the terrain. She sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded in her lap, posture erect but tense. Vincent could feel the nervousness radiating from her like heat waves. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked, and there was something in her voice, a childlike vulnerability, that almost made Vincent give up everything right there. "On the contrary." Finally, he raised his eyes and looked at her directly. The impact was immediate. Emily blinked several times as if trying to focus the image, and Vincent saw the exact moment when something clicked in her mind. A shadow of recognition passed over her face, but she quickly pushed it away as if it were impossible. "Your work has been impeccable," Vincent continued, studying each micro-expression of hers. "Mrs. Martinez talks about nothing else, says you treat this house as if it were a temple." I like what I do, sir. It's a beautiful house. It must have many stories." "Stories?" Vincent repeated the word, savoring it. "Yes, this house has many stories, some happy, others not so much." He stood up and walked to the bookshelf, picking up a book he knew she would recognize. "Do you like to read?" Emily's eyes widened when she saw the volume of poetry by Emily Dickinson, the same one she had cited during one of the taxi rides. "So yes, sir, very much. This was the favorite poet of someone very important I knew a long time ago." Vincent opened the book to a marked page where he had underlined verses that Emily had recited from memory in the car. "Do you know this poem?" Emily stood up and approached, her eyes scanning the familiar lines. "Hope is the thing with feathers. It's one of my favorites." Her voice was strange, as if she were fighting against a memory that insisted on emerging. "Recite it for me." "Sir?" "Recite, please." Emily looked at him for a long moment, and Vincent saw a silent war happening in her eyes. Finally, she lowered her head and began to recite, her voice gaining strength and musicality as the words flowed. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all." When she finished, the silence in the room was as dense as fog. Vincent was standing just a meter away from her, close enough to smell the cheap perfume she wore, to see the small freckles on her neck, to notice how her hands trembled slightly. "You have a gift," he said softly. "You shouldn't be cleaning houses. You should be writing, publishing, being read by people who understand beauty." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but she contained them. "Life doesn't always allow us to follow our gifts, Mr. Reynolds." "And if it did? What if I said, I could help you?" Now she looked at him with suspicion. "Why? Why would you care about that?" Vincent took another step closer, and Emily instinctively backed away, hitting her back against the bookshelf. They stayed like this, in a silent dance of approach, and they flight until Vincent extended his hand and lightly touched her face. "Because," he began, but the words died in his throat when he felt the soft skin under his fingers. Emily closed her eyes and, for an impossible second, leaned into the touch. Then reality returned like a slap. Emily pulled away abruptly, her eyes wide, with shock and something that looked like recognition. I need to get back to work," she stammered, practically fleeing the room. Vincent remained alone, his hand still extended in the air, feeling the ghost of the warmth of her skin on his fingers. He had crossed a line that could not be undone. And the worst part was that Emily had felt it too. He saw it in her eyes, in the way she leaned into his touch before remembering who they supposedly were to each other. That night, Vincent didn't go out with the taxi. Instead, he stayed home, watching Emily through the cameras. She worked mechanically, distracted, occasionally stopping to touch her own face in the place where he had touched her. When she finished her shift, she ran out of the mansion as if fleeing a fire. Vincent knew he had made a mistake, but he also knew there was no going back. The mask was slipping, and soon Emily would make the connections he had spent months planting in her mind. The question was, when that happened, would she run away or finally understand that they were destined to meet? 3 days passed without Emily showing up for work. Mrs. Martinez said she had called, claiming family problems. Vincent knew it was a lie. She was processing what had happened, trying to understand why a rich and powerful man treated her as if he knew her intimately. On Thursday night, he couldn't take it anymore. He took the taxi and went to the south side, driving slowly down her street until he saw her sitting on the doorstep of her house, a notebook in her lap, writing by the light of a street lamp. She seemed smaller there, more fragile, and Vincent felt a wave of protection so intense he almost got out of the car to hug her. Instead, he honked softly. Emily raised her head, recognized the car, and walked to him with hesitant steps. "Need a ride?" he asked, trying to maintain the taxi driver's voice, but knowing it was useless. Emily got into the car without saying anything. They remained silent for several blocks until she finally spoke. "I know you." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Vincent stopped the car on an empty street and turned to her. In the darkness of the vehicle, her eyes shone with a mixture of fear, confusion, and something deeper. "Yes," he said simply. "You know me." And there, in that car parked, on any street in Chicago's periphery, the worlds of Vincent and Emily finally collided irreversibly. "It's you," Emily whispered, her voice barely more than a thread. "All this time, it's you." Vincent turned off the engine, and they sat there, surrounded by the silence of the early morning and the weight of a truth that could no longer be hidden. The streetlights created dancing shadows inside the car, and Vincent could see tears glistening in Emily's eyes. "Why?" she asked, and there was so much pain in the word that Vincent felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Why did you do this to me?" "Because..." Vincent struggled to find words that could explain months of obsession, of sick need, of distorted love. "Because from the first night you entered this car, I knew I was lost." "Lost?" Emily turned to him, her eyes shining with anger. "I was the one who was lost. You made me believe there was someone who truly cared about me. The kind taxi driver who listened to my stories, who let me pay with coins, who never judged me. And all along it was you, watching me, studying me like I was an insect in a glass box." "It wasn't like that." "Yes, it was." Emily opened the car door, but Vincent was faster, holding her wrist gently. "Please don't leave. Let me explain." "Explain what? How you manipulated me? How you played with me?" She tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. "Let me explain why I needed to do this." Vincent took a deep breath, knowing he was about to open wounds he had spent decades trying to heal. I never knew how to connect with people for real. Since childhood, I always had to wear masks, be what others expected me to be. The grateful orphan, the perfect adopted son, the ruthless businessman. But with you, in the taxi, being just an ordinary driver, I could be real. I could hear you talk, know who you really were, without my money or my power changing how you saw me. Emily stopped struggling to break free, but still looked at him with distrust. And in the mansion, touching me, making me feel things I shouldn't feel for my boss. In the mansion, I couldn't pretend anymore that I didn't know you. Each day, you spent there cleaning, taking care of the house, being kind to everyone. I fell more in love, and when I saw you with Ryan. Ryan. The name came out of Emily's mouth like a blade. What did you do to Ryan? Vincent closed his eyes, knowing he was about to destroy any chance he still had with her. I drove him away from you. How? I offered him a job he couldn't refuse in Rockford. Emily stared at him in total shock as if she was seeing a stranger. You destroyed the only chance I had to be happy. I was jealous. I was desperate. I didn't know how. Get out of the car. Her voice was dead, emotionless. Emily, please. Get out of the car, she shouted, and Vincent had never heard her shout before. The sound echoed through the car like a gunshot. Vincent got out slowly, hands raised in surrender. Emily got out on the other side, walking quickly toward her house. He followed at a distance, desperate not to lose her completely. Emily, wait. At least let me take you home. She turned, and Vincent saw that she was crying. You don't understand. Do you? You took away from me the only person who saw me as I really am. Ryan knew me since childhood, knew where I came from, and still thought I was special. But you just want to possess me, as if I were just another pretty object for your collection. It's not like that. I love you. No. Emily shook her head vehemently. You don't know what love is. Love is letting the person be free to choose. Love is wanting the best for them, even if it's not you. You only know how to control, manipulate, make people dance to your tune. Vincent took another step closer. Then teach me. Teach me how to love for real. For a moment, something wavered in Emily's eyes. Vincent saw a spark of the gentleness she always showed, of the compassion that made her take care of others before herself. But then she hardened her face again. I can't save you, Vincent. Not you, not anyone. Each person has to choose what kind of human being they want to be. And you. You chose to be someone who hurts others to get what you want. She turned and ran home, leaving Vincent alone on the empty street. He stood there for almost an hour, looking at the windows of her house, watching the lights come on, and then go off one by one until everything was dark. In the following days, Emily didn't show up for work. Mrs. Martinez said she had resigned by phone, claiming she had found another job. Vincent knew it was a lie, but there was nothing he could do. He had lost the right to be in her life. He began going out with the taxi every night, driving aimlessly through Chicago's streets, hoping to see her at some bus stop, on some sidewalk, somewhere he could have one more chance. To explain, to redeem himself. But Emily had disappeared from his life as completely as she had appeared. A week later, Vincent was driving through Wicker Park when he saw a scene that made his blood freeze. Emily was leaving a bar, but she wasn't alone. Ryan had returned. They were walking together, and even from a distance, Vincent could see that something had changed between them. The old familiarity had evolved into something deeper, more intimate. Vincent followed them to a residential street, where he saw Ryan stop Emily under a streetlight. They talked for a few minutes, and then Ryan put his hands on her face, drying tears that Vincent couldn't see but knew were there. And then, with a tenderness that made Vincent want to die, Ryan kissed Emily. It wasn't a first date kiss. It was the kiss of two people who had known each other for a long time, who had lost and found each other again, who were ready to build something real together. It was everything Vincent could never give her. Simplicity, honesty, love without games or manipulations. Vincent accelerated the car and disappeared into the night, driving non-stop until he reached the place where everything had begun. The vacant lot where St. Vincent's orphanage stood was covered with weeds and trash, but the ruins of the main building were still there, like broken teeth in the urban landscape. He stopped the car and entered the ruins on foot. There, among the rubble of his childhood, Vincent finally understood what Emily had tried to teach him. Love couldn't be forced. It couldn't be bought, manipulated, or controlled. True love was about free choice, about two people deciding every day to stay together because they wanted to, not because they had to. And he had thrown away his only chance to experience that. Vincent spent 3 weeks in the orphanage ruins. Not literally. He returned to the mansion every morning, showered, wore expensive suits, and pretended to be the ruthless businessman everyone expected. But his soul had settled among the rubble, reliving memories he had buried under decades of success and power. He remembered Ryan now, the boy who shared the last piece of bread when someone arrived hungry, who organized theatrical performances with old sheets to distract the younger children during storms, who had been adopted first at 10 years old, but who had by a simple but caring family who saw in him what Vincent never managed to show the Reynolds, the ability to love without expecting anything in return. The irony was cruel. Vincent had become rich and powerful, but lost his humanity in the process. Ryan had remained poor and full of difficulties, but preserved something precious that Vincent didn't even know how to recover anymore, the ability to make people feel safe by his side. During those 3 weeks, Vincent didn't go out with the taxi. He couldn't bear the idea of seeing other faces, hearing other stories, when the only story that mattered had ended in the worst possible way. Instead, he immersed himself in work with an intensity that worried even his closest partners. "Are you okay, Vincent?" asked Mark Sanchez, his right-hand man, during a meeting that extended into the early morning. "I seem her different." Vincent raised his eyes from the contracts he was mechanically signing. Different how? Like someone who lost something important and doesn't know how to recover it. Mark's perception was like a blade piercing Vincent's chest. They had worked together for 15 years, but never had personal conversations. The fact that his pain was so visible that even a colleague noticed frightened him. "I'm fine," Vincent lied, "just focused." But he wasn't fine. Each morning he woke up expecting to hear Emily's voice in the mansion's corridors. Each night he dreamed of her entering the taxi, smiling with that gentle shyness that had captured him from the first moment. And every time he awoke to reality, that she had left his life forever, that she was building something beautiful with Ryan, he felt as if a part of him died a little more. It was Mrs. Martinez who finally confronted him. One September morning, she knocked on the office door with more determination than usual. "Mr. Vincent, I need to talk to you." Vincent didn't raise his eyes from the computer screen. "If it's about replacing Emily, hire whoever you think is best." "It's not about replacement. It's about you." Now he looked at her. Mrs. Martinez was serious with that maternal expression she used when she was about to say uncomfortable truths. "You're killing yourself slowly. You don't eat right. You don't sleep right. You walk around the house like a ghost. This has to do with the girl, doesn't it?" Vincent slowly closed the laptop. "I don't know what you're talking about. I know you liked her. I saw how you looked at her, how you changed when she was around. And I know something happened because she left here crying on the last day. She chose to leave." "Chose or was forced to choose?" Mrs. Martinez crossed her arms. "Mr. Vincent, I've worked for your family for 25 years. I saw you grow up, saw how the Reynolds raised you, with love, but also with the idea that everything in life can be controlled, bought, dominated. And I know that way worked in business, but it doesn't work with people." Vincent stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the garden where Emily used to feed the cats was empty. The animals had disappeared after she stopped showing up, as if they sensed their protector wouldn't return. "I hurt her," he admitted, almost whispering. "I did unforgivable things." "And what are you going to do to fix it?" "There's no possible fix. She's with someone else now. Someone better than me." Mrs. Martinez sighed. "Mr. Vincent, may I give an opinion?" He nodded. "You've always had everything very easy. Money, power, people doing your bidding. You never really had to fight for anything that mattered. And now, the first time something truly valuable slips from your hands, you give up. It's not giving up. It's accepting that some things can't be forced." "Who said anything about forcing? I'm talking about fighting. Really fighting. Not with money or power, but with the heart. Humility, genuine remorse, real change." Vincent turned to her. "And if it's not enough?" "What if it is?" That night, for the first time in weeks, Vincent went out with the taxi. But he didn't drive aimlessly as before. He went straight to the south side, to the street where Emily lived. He parked 2 blocks away and waited. Around 10 o'clock, he saw Ryan arriving on foot, carrying a simple bouquet of supermarket flowers. Vincent watched him climb the hill with a light step, like someone going home, to someone waiting for him with affection. 15 minutes later, Ryan left the house and walked to the bus stop. Vincent followed him with the car, keeping his distance. When Ryan waved for the taxi, Vincent almost didn't stop. But something stronger than his cowardice made him slow down. "Where to?" he asked, trying to disguise his voice. "Pilsen, please. Archer Avenue." During the first few minutes of the ride, they remained silent. Vincent studied Ryan through the rearview mirror, looking for signs of the boy he had known in the orphanage. He still had the same easy smile, the same kind eyes. But now there was something more, a maturity that came from someone who had faced difficulties and hadn't become bitter because of them. "Can I ask a question?" Vincent said, still disguising his voice. "Sure." "The woman you visited, have you been together long?" Ryan smiled, and it was a smile that made Vincent's heart tighten with pain and envy. "Actually, we've known each other since we were children. We lost touch for years, reconnected recently. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "She went through some difficult things. She's afraid to trust, to open up. Someone hurt her a lot, you know. So I'm trying to show that not all men are the same, that some people really care without wanting anything in return." Vincent gripped the steering wheel. "And is it working?" "Slowly. She still has nightmares, still gets startled when someone approaches too quickly. But yesterday she let me hold her hand while we watched TV. It might seem small, but for her, it was a big step." "Nightmares." "She hasn't told me everything, but I think someone stalked her, made her feel like she was being watched all the time, that she had no privacy, no control over her own life." Ryan sighed. "It must have been terrible to live like that." Vincent stopped at the first red light and rested his forehead on the steering wheel. Each of Ryan's words was like a stab in his chest. He had caused this. He had transformed the woman he loved into a person haunted by fear, unable to trust. "Are you okay?" Ryan asked, concerned. "I am." Vincent raised his head and continued driving. Do you love her?" "With every fiber of my being," Ryan answered without hesitation. "She's the strongest person I know. She went through horrible things, but never lost her kindness. She takes care of everyone, always puts others first. She deserves to be loved. The right way." When they reached their destination, Ryan paid the fare and left a generous tip. Before getting out of the car, he leaned toward the window. "Thanks for the conversation. Sometimes it helps to talk about these things." Vincent watched him enter the simple building where he lived, carrying on his shoulders the lightness of someone who has something true to live for. And there, alone in the car, Vincent finally understood the size of his loss. He hadn't just lost Emily. He had lost the chance to become the kind of man she deserved, the kind of man Ryan already was. 2 weeks after the conversation with Ryan, Vincent made the most difficult decision of his life. He sold the mansion. It wasn't an impulsive decision. For days he walked through the corridors where he had watched Emily work, through the rooms where he had installed cameras to spy on her, through the office where he had touched her for the first time. Each room carried memories of his obsession, of his inability to love in a healthy way. That house had become a mausoleum of his mistakes. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Vincent?" asked Mrs. Martinez when he informed her of the decision. "This house has history, tradition." "That's exactly why I need to leave," Vincent replied. "I need to start from scratch." He bought a simple apartment in Wicker Park, near where he had seen Emily and Ryan kiss for the first time. It wasn't a coincidence. It was penance. He wanted to live every day remembering what he had lost, what would never be his. He also made another radical decision. He started therapy. Not with just any psychologist, but with a specialist in trauma and obsessive behavior. Dr. Caroline Miller was a 50-year-old woman with gray hair, direct gaze, and zero tolerance for self-pity. "You don't want to heal," she said in the third session, after hearing Vincent minimize his actions. "You want me to validate your romantic pain, to confirm that you're a misunderstood tragic hero, but that's not what you are. What am I then? A man who used power and money to control a woman who couldn't defend herself, who stalked her, manipulated her life, destroyed her chances of happiness out of pure selfishness. That's not love, Vincent. It's possession. It's abuse." The words fell on him like stones. For weeks, Vincent left the sessions feeling worse than when he arrived. But gradually, he began to understand that this was the only way to really change, recognizing the extent of the damage he had caused, not just to Emily, but to himself. "Talk about the orphanage," Dr. Miller said in an October session. Vincent had never talked about that with anyone, not even with the Reynolds, who knew only the basic facts. Orphaned, adopted at 12, past overcome. But there, in that small room overlooking a tree losing its leaves, he began to unearth memories he had buried under layers of success. "We were invisible," he began slowly. "Children no one wanted, in a place no one visited. I learned very early that to survive, you have to observe everything, understand how people work, use that information to your advantage. And you took that to your adult life." Yes, I always knew exactly what to say, how to act to get what I wanted. In business, this is considered strategic intelligence. And with Emily, Vincent closed his eyes. With Emily, I used everything I learned to manipulate her. I studied her schedules, her tastes, her fears. I planted clues so she would feel connected to me. I drove away the man she loved. I transformed my house into a panopticon where she was the prisoner without knowing. "Why do you think you did that?" "Because," Vincent struggled with the words, "because she was the first person in decades who looked at me as if I were just human. In the taxi, when I was just an ordinary driver, she treated me with real kindness. Not because I was rich or powerful, but because she is like that, kind to everyone, and I became addicted to that feeling." "So you decided you deserved to have that kindness forever, regardless of what she wanted?" "Yes." The admission came out like a painful sigh. "Yes, that's exactly it." While doing therapy, Vincent also began to change other aspects of his life. He sold most of his luxury cars, keeping only what was necessary. He donated clothes, jewelry, objects he had accumulated over the years. He began volunteering at an NGO that cared for homeless children, not to feel better about himself, but because he needed to remember where he had come from. That's where he reconnected with Father Michael, one of the few adults from the orphanage who had treated the children with dignity. Now 70 years old, white hair, but the same kind smile as always. "Vincent Reynolds," the priest said when he recognized him, "I heard about your success. I always knew you would go far." "Too far," Vincent murmured. "Father, can I confess something?" They talked for hours in the small chapel of the NGO. Vincent told everything, about Emily, about his obsession, about the choices he had made. Father Michael listened in silence, without judgment, but also without easy absolution. "You hurt an innocent person," the priest finally said. "That can't be undone, but it can be used to ensure you never do this to anyone again." "How?" "By learning to love yourself first. Children like you who grew up without real affection sometimes confuse need with love. You didn't love Emily, Vincent. You needed her to feel complete. That's emotional hunger, not love. And how do I learn the difference? By starting small, acts of kindness without expecting anything in return, taking care of someone who can never repay you, choosing others' well-being even when it doesn't benefit you." In the months that followed, Vincent dedicated himself to this. He worked at the NGO every afternoon after business hours. He helped children with homework, organized fundraising events, painted walls, cleaned bathrooms. Humble, invisible, work that no one applauded or recognized. And slowly, something began to change within him. The constant need to control, to possess, to be the center of everything began to diminish. For the first time in decades, Vincent experienced the simple satisfaction of doing something good just because it was the right thing to do. But Emily remained in his thoughts every day, not as an obsession anymore, but as a painful reminder of who he had been and who he could never be for her. Sometimes driving around the city, he caught himself looking for her in crowds, imagining how she was doing, if she was happy with Ryan, if the nightmares had stopped. It was on one of those afternoons, returning from the NGO, that Vincent saw something that made his heart stop. At a bus stop on State Street, a pregnant woman was waiting for public transportation, one hand resting on her rounded belly, the other holding a heavy shopping bag. It was Emily. Vincent parked the car 2 blocks ahead and returned on foot, hiding among other people on the sidewalk. She was more beautiful than ever, with that special glow that pregnant women sometimes have. She wore a simple dress, but there was something different in her posture, less tension in the shoulders, more peace in her face. When the bus arrived, Vincent saw a man run down the sidewalk to help her board. Ryan. He was breathless, as if he had run from far away, but smiled upon seeing her and tenderly kissed her forehead before helping her onto the vehicle. Vincent stood on the sidewalk, watching the bus disappear in traffic, taking with it the woman he had loved in the wrong way and the man who loved her in the right way. And for the first time since he had lost her, Vincent smiled, a true smile, full of pain, but also of something he had never felt before, genuine happiness for someone else's happiness. Emily was safe. She was loved. She was building a family with someone who knew how to care for her without controlling her. It was everything Vincent should have always wished for her. 6 months after seeing Emily pregnant at the bus stop, Vincent received a call that would change everything again. It was Father Michael, and his voice was grave, loaded with a sadness that made Vincent's stomach contract. "Vincent, I need to tell you something about one of the families we serve here at the NGO." "What happened?" "It's about a young woman, Emily. She used to come here sometimes with her grandmother, Connie, who participated in the elderly group. The lady passed away yesterday, and the young woman, she needs help." Vincent almost dropped the phone. "What do you mean?" "The grandmother was the only family she had, and with the baby coming in a few weeks, she's desperate." "The boyfriend?" "Well, things got complicated. It seems he couldn't handle the pressure of being a father, especially with the financial difficulties, disappeared 2 weeks ago." The world spun around Vincent. Ryan had abandoned Emily. The good man, the hero of the story, had fled when things got difficult, leaving her alone, pregnant and mourning. Where is she now? In a cheap boarding house downtown, no money to pay for the birth, no family, no prospects. "Vincent, I know you have history, but—" "What's the address, Vincent?" Wrote down the information and hung up the phone with trembling hands. For an hour he stood in the middle of his apartment's living room, fighting against contradictory instincts. A part of him, the old obsessive part, saw this as an opportunity. Emily was vulnerable, needing help. He could be the hero now, save her, win her gratitude. But therapy had taught him something fundamental: the difference between genuinely helping and helping to control. If he went to Emily now, it would have to be just to help, without expectations, without hidden agendas, without expecting her to forgive him, or that this would create some kind of emotional debt. It was the biggest test of his life. Vincent took the car and drove downtown. The boarding house was an old building, poorly maintained, with a smell of mold and poorly lit corridors. At room 237, he knocked on the door gently. "Who is it?" Emily's voice was different, weaker, more tired. It's Vincent. Father. Michael told me about Connie. I came to offer help." The silence from the other side of the door lasted an eternity. Vincent could hear her heavy breathing, could imagine the conflict in her mind. Finally, the door opened a few inches, revealing only part of Emily's face. She was pale, with deep circles under her eyes, her hair lusterless. Her belly was enormous, and Vincent calculated she must be in her 8th month of pregnancy. But what shocked him most was the expression in her eyes. There was no more fear of him as before. There was only a weariness so deep it seemed to have swallowed all other emotions. "What do you want?" she asked, without fully opening the door. "I want to help. No conditions, no expectations, just help." "Why?" Vincent took a deep breath. "Because you don't deserve to go through this alone, and because it's the right thing to do." Emily studied him for a long moment. "Come in," she finally said, opening the door. The room was tiny, with a twin bed, a broken chair, and a shared bathroom in the hallway. Emily sat heavily on the bed, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding a used tissue. "Did Father Michael tell you about Grandma?" she asked, her voice choked. "He did. I'm sorry, Emily. I know how much she meant to you. The tears began to stream down her face. She was better, you know. The medicines were working, the diabetes was under control. Then Ryan disappeared and she couldn't handle the idea of seeing me alone and pregnant. Her heart just stopped. Vincent approached slowly and knelt beside the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. And Ryan? What happened? He got scared. Emily wiped her nose. When he found out I was pregnant, he was happy at first. But then, the bills started, the reality of having to support a family. He said he wasn't ready, that he needed time. He went out to buy cigarettes one night and never came back. Son of a bitch, Vincent muttered, unable to control himself. Emily looked at him in surprise. It was the first time she had seen him show anger in defense of her, rather than because of her. Sorry, he corrected himself. It's just, you didn't deserve that. Maybe I do deserve it. Emily ran her hand over her belly. Maybe it's karma. For the bad things I did. For the people I hurt. Stop. Vincent moved closer, but still without touching her. You never did anything bad in your life. You never hurt anyone. If anyone here has negative karma, it's me. Why did you come? She suddenly asked, looking directly into his eyes. After everything that happened, why are you here? Vincent knew this moment would come. And he knew there was only one possible answer, the complete truth. Because I've spent the last few months learning the difference between loving someone and needing someone. I never loved you right, Emily. I wanted you, desired you, idealized you. But I never truly loved you because true love means wanting the best for the person, even if that doesn't include you. He stood up and walked to the small window, looking at the busy street below. When I saw you pregnant that day, with Ryan, taking care of you, I felt genuine happiness for the first time. Not because I could have you, but because you were well, you were safe, you were loved. It was everything I should have always wished for you. And now? Emily asked softly. Vincent turned. Now I want to help, because it's what a decent person would do. Not to win you over, not so you'll forgive me or owe me something, but because you're going through a difficult time, and I have the means to help. That's all. Emily remained silent for a long time, studying his face as if looking for signs of the lie she had always known. But she found only raw honesty, real vulnerability. I can't forgive you, she finally said. At least not now. You hurt me badly, Vincent. You made me question my own sanity, made me feel like I was being watched all the time, that I had no control over my own life. I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness, I'm just offering help. What kind of help? Vincent took a deep breath. A place to stay until the baby is born, complete medical coverage, financial help so you can establish yourself afterward if you want. All without anything in return, no conditions. And in exchange, nothing, absolutely nothing. Emily looked at him for a long time, and Vincent saw the internal struggle in her eyes, pride against need, distrust against desperation. I need to think, she finally said. Of course. Vincent took a card from his pocket and left it on the table. My number is there. If you decide to accept or if you need anything before that, call me. He was almost at the door when he heard her voice, weak but determined. Vincent? Yes, if I accept. If I let you help me. There can be no expectations, none. Do you understand that? Vincent turned and looked at her one last time. She was sitting on the narrow bed, a protective hand over her belly, her face tired but still beautiful, her eyes full of a strength that he had almost destroyed, but that miraculously still existed. I understand, he said. I expect nothing beyond the chance to do the right thing. And for the first time in his life, Vincent Reynolds said this, meaning it truly. Emily called 3 days later, in the early morning of a rainy Thursday. Vincent answered on the first ring, already awake, as if he had been waiting. I'm having pains, she said, her voice tense. I think the baby is coming. Where are you? At the boarding house. But, Vincent, I don't have money for the hospital. And I don't know if... I'm coming to get you, don't move. Vincent got dressed in less than 5 minutes and ran to the car. The traffic was light at that hour, and he reached the boarding house in 15 minutes. He found Emily sitting on the edge of the bed, breathing heavily with a small suitcase beside her. How far apart are the contractions? He asked, picking up her suitcase. About every 10 minutes, more or less. She held his arm when a new wave of pain hit her. Vincent, I'm scared. Everything will be all right, he said, and for the first time in months she seemed to believe him. I'm taking you to the best hospital in the city. Northwestern Memorial Hospital was 20 minutes away. During the journey, Vincent held Emily's hand while driving with one hand, letting her squeeze his fingers during contractions. She didn't talk much, focused on breathing, but occasionally looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Why are you doing this? She asked during a red light. Because it's the right thing. No, seriously, why? Vincent looked at her, seeing sweat on her forehead, hair stuck to her face, but still the most beautiful woman he had ever known. Because maybe, by doing the right thing for you now, I can make peace with who I was before. And if you can't, then at least you and your baby will be safe. And that's worth everything. At the hospital, Vincent took care of all the paperwork while Emily was taken to the room. He paid for a private room, private medical team, everything she might need. When the staff asked about his relationship with the patient, he hesitated only a second before answering, I'm a friend. The labor lasted 14 hours. Vincent stayed in the waiting room the whole time, nervously walking the corridors, drinking bad coffee from the machine, updating Father Michael by phone. Occasionally a nurse would come with news. Everything's going well, it will still take time, she's being very brave. At 6 in the morning on Friday, Dr. Carroll came out of the delivery room with a tired smile. It's a girl. Mother and baby are doing well. Vincent felt his legs weaken. Can I see them? In a little while. She specifically asked for you to be called. When they finally entered the room, Vincent saw Emily reclining in the bed, pale but radiant, holding a small pink bundle. She raised her eyes when he entered, and there was something different in her gaze. A softness he hadn't seen in months. Want to meet her? She asked softly. Vincent approached slowly as if entering sacred territory. The baby was tiny, perfect, with tufts of brown hair and the typical reddened face of newborns. She's beautiful, he whispered. What will you name her? Sophie, my mother's name. Emily caressed her daughter's little face. Vincent, during labor, I was thinking about many things. You don't need to talk now, rest. No, I need to speak. She looked at him directly. I thought about how strange it is that you're here, when a few months ago I was so afraid of you. And I thought about how Ryan, who I thought loved me, disappeared at the first difficulty. Vincent sat in the chair beside the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. Emily. Let me finish. She adjusted the baby's position in her arms. I can't forget what you did to me. I can't pretend it didn't happen, but I also can't ignore that you're here now when I need it most, without asking for anything in return. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know. And that's exactly why it might be possible in the future to build something different. Not what we had before, because that was based on lies and manipulation, but maybe a friendship based on honesty. Vincent felt his heart tighten, but not from romantic hope. It was something purer, gratitude for the chance to be there, to be part of that moment, even if just as a spectator. It would be an honor, he said simply. In the days that followed, Vincent remained present but discreet. He visited the hospital twice a day, brought flowers, homemade food that Mrs. Martinez prepared especially for Emily. He helped organize the discharge, the new apartment he had rented for her in a safe and well-located neighborhood. I can't accept this, Emily said, when she saw the 2-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, completely furnished. It's too much. It's for Sophie, Vincent replied. Every child deserves a safe home. And afterward, when she grows up, when I manage to stabilize myself? Afterward, you decide. If you want to continue living here, great. If you want to move, also great. There are no contracts, no commitments, it's just a gift for her. Emily studied him for a long moment. You really have changed, haven't you? I'm trying every day. Why, to win me back? Vincent shook his head. So I can look in the mirror without feeling disgusted with myself. It was then that Emily did something he didn't expect. She walked to where he was standing, stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek, a chaste, fraternal kiss but loaded with meaning. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." When she pulled away, Vincent saw tears in her eyes, but also something he hadn't seen in months. Peace. "Emily," he said softly. "Yes? If someday you want to talk about what happened between us, about anything, I'll be here. Not as the man who stalked you, but as someone who cares about your well-being." "I know." She smiled, and it was the first true smile he had seen from her since before everything fell apart. "And Vincent?" "Yes?" "I think Sophie will need a stable male figure in her life. Someone who can be an uncle, maybe. Someone she can trust." Vincent felt something break and rebuild inside his chest at the same time. It wasn't the ending he had dreamed of months ago, but it was something infinitely more valuable, the chance to be part of their lives in the right, honest, healthy way. "It would be the greatest privilege of my life," he answered. And for the first time in decades, Vincent Reynolds felt truly at peace with himself, not because he had gotten what he wanted, but because he had finally learned to want the right things. 2 years later, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, Vincent was in Grant Park, pushing Sophie on the swing. The girl had her mother's brown eyes and a smile that lit up any environment. At 2 years old, she already spoke a few words and had chosen Vincent as her favorite Uncle Vinny. "Hiya, Uncle Vinny," she shouted, laughing when the swing went up. "Be careful not to scare her," Emily said from the bench where she was sitting, reading a book. It was her first published novel. A small publisher had become interested in her poetry and short stories. The book was called New Beginnings and had a dedication that made Vincent smile every time he saw it. "For Sophie, who taught me that true love is not afraid." "She's not afraid of anything," Vincent replied, watching as Sophie stretched her legs to reach the clouds. Just like her mother. Emily raised her eyes from the book and smiled. In the last 2 years, their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. It wasn't the intense, obsessive romance Vincent had imagined in the past, nor was it just casual friendship. It was something deeper and more solid. Mutual respect, genuine care, a connection based on conscious choice instead of need or blind passion. Vincent had kept his word. He was present in their lives without invading, helped without controlling, loved without possessing. He took Sophie to the pediatrician when Emily was working, picked her up from daycare when necessary, participated in birthdays and holidays as part of the family they had built together, a non-traditional family, but real. "Sophie, let's see the ducks," Emily called, putting the book in her bag. The girl got off the swing and ran toward the lake, her step still a bit awkward. Vincent and Emily followed her, walking side by side in a comfortable intimacy that had taken months to develop. "How was the therapy session this week?" Emily asked. Vincent had continued with Dr. Miller, now more for maintenance than crisis. "Good. We talked about healthy boundaries in relationships, about how to express feelings without expecting reciprocity. And how are you feeling about that?" Vincent stopped for a moment, watching Sophie throw crumbs to the ducks. "Light. For the first time in my life, I feel light." "Light how?" "Like I'm not carrying the weight of always having to get something from someone. I can be here with you two, just for the pleasure of the company. I can help because I want to help. I can care without needing you to care back in the same measure." Emily stopped walking and faced him. "Vincent?" "Yes?" "You know that I care, right? Maybe not in the way you wanted before, but I care. You've become one of the most important people in my life." Vincent felt a familiar warmth in his chest, but now it was different. It wasn't the obsessive hunger of before, but something more, like gratitude. "I know, and that's more than I deserve." "Don't say that." Emily lightly touched his arm. "You deserve to be loved, Vincent. You just needed to learn how to love back." They continued walking toward the lake where Sophie was squatting, watching a duck approach. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said after a few minutes of silence. "Always. Do you still think about how things could have been different between us?" Vincent considered the question carefully. "Sometimes, but not with sadness or regret, more like philosophical curiosity. If I had met you in another way, at another time, being a different person, and I realize it wouldn't have worked even then. The Vincent from 2 years ago, even in a better version, still wasn't mature enough to love you right. He still confused need with love, possession with care." Sophie came running toward them, holding a duck feather she had found on the ground. "Look, Mommy! Look, Uncle Vinny, it's from the duck!" "How beautiful, Princess," Vincent said, crouching to be at her height. "Shall we keep it as a treasure?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically and put the feather in her coat pocket. "Can I ask you something too?" Vincent said when he stood up. "Sure. Have you managed to forgive Ryan for what he did?" Emily thought for a moment. "I forgave in the sense that I no longer carry anger. I understood that he was scared, immature, wasn't ready to be a father. It doesn't justify what he did, but it explains it. And in the end, if he had stayed, maybe the three of us wouldn't have found this balance we have now." "Do you think Sophie misses having a father?" "She has you," Emily replied simply. "Not as a biological father, but as a stable, loving, present male figure. It's more than many children have." Vincent felt his eyes mist over. "Emily, What?" "I love you." The words came out before he could think about them. Not in the obsessive way of before, not as possession or need. "I love you as you deserve to be loved. Without expectations, without demands. I just love who you are, the amazing woman you've become, the extraordinary mother you are." Emily stopped walking again, and for a moment Vincent feared he had ruined everything. But then she smiled, that smile he had seen for the first time in the taxi, so long ago. "I love you too, Vincent." "Really?" "I love the man you've chosen to become. I love how you take care of Sophie, how you respected my boundaries, how you worked hard to change. I love that you learned the difference between loving and needing." Vincent held her face between his hands delicately, as if holding something precious and fragile. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "You may." The kiss was different from anything they had shared before. There was no urgency, possession, or desperation. It was gentle, full of mutual respect, of conscious choice, of two adults who had overcome their traumas and found a healthy way to connect. When they separated, Sophie was pulling at the hem of Emily's dress. "Mommy, Uncle Vinny, are you dating?" They laughed, and Vincent picked the girl up. "What do you think, Princess?" "I think so," Sophie said, clapping her hands. "Now can Uncle Vinny live with us?" Vincent looked at Emily, who was smiling with tears in her eyes. "Maybe," she said. "But first you two need to help me choose the dress for our first official date." "A date?" Vincent asked, smiling. "Yes, I want to do everything right this time. Start from the beginning, build something true step by step. And if we discover we're not romantically compatible, then we continue being family the way we are now. Because this," she gestured between the three of them, "this is no longer based on passion or need. It's based on choice, on mutual care, on real love." Vincent kissed Sophie's forehead and then Emily's forehead. "You know what that means?" he said. "What?" "That we finally learned that the best love stories aren't about people meeting. They're about people choosing to stay." As they walked back to the car, Sophie on Vincent's shoulders, Emily holding his free hand, the three formed the image of a family that had found its way through darkness. A family built not on illusions or unresolved needs, but on the solid foundation of true love. The kind that liberates instead of imprisoning, that heals instead of hurting, that builds instead of controlling. Vincent Reynolds had finally learned to love, and Emily, for the first time in her life, felt truly free to love back. And Sophie just knew she was unconditionally loved by two people who had chosen to become better because of her, and in the end